Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut will be one of the speakers here this week. He joins us now to talk about the Clinton-Kaine ticket and this first day of the convention. Senator, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I got to see where those seats are.
Yeah, they're right here. They're right here.
All right, that's not bad.
What your thoughts? I mean, obviously Democrats didn't want to start out this way.
Yeah, listen, I think first of all we have to understand that conventions are for insiders, right? I mean, let's be honest. People back home in my state, people in swing states across the country are making up their mind on this race based on which candidate they believe is going to be best for putting wages in their pockets, protecting this country from terrorism, and I think Hillary Clinton is going to come out very well on all of those analyses. What happens here and what happens in Philadelphia, it's interesting for you and I, it's interesting for people that pay attention to politics, but it's really not what ultimately makes up people's minds. And here's what we know. Polls tell us that about 90% of Bernie Sanders supporters are supporting Senator Clinton, and so there's a small handful today that have made a little bit of noise, but they're not representative of the broader array of Bernie Sanders supporters.
Maybe, you know, as more and more find out about what was written in those emails, they're kind of, we've talked to a bunch here who say they're really angry about it. And the fact that the party chairman had to resign and couldn't even gavel in this convention, I mean, that's kind of embarrassing.
Well, what people should be angry about is that we have mounting evidence that it was the Russian government that...
Now, what is the evidence?
Well, right now we have suggestions from counterterrorism experts who have looked at this pattern. We know that the Russians have been probing the DNC system earlier in the year. This certainly fits a pattern of behavior from the Russians. We don't know that for sure, but people should be angry.
Then connecting the dots to the Russians and the Trump campaign?
I'm not suggesting that there's some coordination between the two, but what people should be angry about is that this is potentially a foreign government that is trying to influence an American election. I'm not suggesting that there's any coordination between Donald Trump and the Russians, but if that's the case, that should be the outrage coming out of the last few days, not the content of internal Democratic National Committee emails.
Even when the head of the party is in these emails saying that we're going to tip the scales for Hillary Clinton and not Bernie Sanders as the primary is going on, I mean, isn't the substance of those emails relevant and disconcerting to you? I mean, at what point is the DNC chair not supposed to be unbiased in this race?
Well, what's relevant is the conduct of the DNC. And if you look at the conduct of the DNC in this race, they were balanced in their approach. And Bernie Sanders himself says that it is not the DNC that caused him to lose the nomination. If you looked at any of our internal emails, you would probably see things that we don't project publicly. But what we pay the Democratic National Committee to do is to run a truly impartial election, which they did, period, stop. And that's the takeaway.
Scott Pelley with 60 Minutes asked Hillary Clinton about this. You wouldn't have seen it on the show, but it was on the web, additional video. Take a listen to this.
In your view, any effort in the DNC to favor one candidate or another would have been improper?
Again, I don't have any information about this, and so I can't answer specifically. We ran our campaign. We ran hard. I can't speak to what people who were not working for me, who were saying whatever they were saying. I can't speak to that. I can only speak to my campaign.
So how does she not know about it? I don't get it.
Well, remember, she wasn't running the DNC, right? We had people that have been at that party's helm for a long time running it. And I can just tell you, in my state, where Hillary Clinton won in a close contest, people made up their minds based on their evaluation of Hillary Clinton as a candidate and Bernie Sanders as a candidate. And nothing that the DNC was doing had anything to do with the decisions that primary voters in my state made. And so I think this is much to do about nothing.
So you're not worried about any demonstrations? You're not worried about embarrassing things from the Sanders supporters? You're not worried about any of the projection of not being unified?
I think this makes wonderful TV, and so I get it. But I also understand that 90% of Sanders supporters have already decided to support Hillary Clinton, and so that loud minority may be making a show today, but it doesn't extend to having an effect on the election.
Finally, I want to talk about your speech on Wednesday. You've been very outspoken about guns and the effort to take them off the streets. That will be the focus of your speech?
That'll be the focus of my speech. And, you know, in particular, we need to talk about the intersection of guns and terrorism. We need to admit that terrorists today in this country, these lone wolf attackers, are not trying to hijack airplanes or make bombs in their basement. They're going to gun shows and buying assault weapons. And so we need to talk about the fact that smart gun policy is also smart anti-terrorism policy. And I think that is what you'll hear from speakers this week on the floor.
You've seen the pushback, obviously, time and time again, and you think this is a winning issue in the general election?
I think that you wouldn't be having a night of the Democratic Convention dedicated to the issue of smarter gun policy if it wasn't a winning issue. I don't think it was for a long time, but right now people see that the lack of any sensible gun policy, for instance, our unwillingness, Republicans' unwillingness to stop people on the terrorist watch list from getting guns, that's making our country less safe. It's scaring people, and they want some action. Hillary Clinton is the only candidate who's dedicated to taking guns away from people on the terrorist watch list. That's a big issue in this election.
Senator Murphy, we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, absolutely.